I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and that is the new Cupra Leon V, the entry-level model in the Leon range. 47,990 drive away, or about 50 grand drive away if you go for a leather pack that just ups the ante in the interior a bit. So I think this vehicle actually fills a very interesting hole in Volkswagen Group's lineup here in Australia. And that was that after the Mark 7.5 Golf departed, you couldn't really get a premium small car without going to an Audi A3, which is of course a lot more expensive, particularly once you start adding options to it. So in many ways, this is kind of a sporty, spiritual successor to cars like the Volkswagen Golf Highline. And for me, that is a very good thing, especially because the chassis underneath the Leon is fantastic. And because the V is wearing slightly smaller 18-inch wheels, it also has excellent compliance for urban and country roads here in Australia. So in today's video, I'm going to take you through the new Leon V, what it gets right, what it doesn't get right and might need to work on in future. We'll check out the interior, the practicality, the boot, and we'll take a drive in the cheapest Cupra Leon, and in fact the cheapest Cupra you can buy here in Australia. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. The calling card of the Leon V, which has just joined the range a little bit late after its fellow variants, is that even though it's the cheapest Leon, it's still very nicely equipped. And in fact, we are sitting in an absolute bog standard car. Metallic paint is included in the price, which is nice, but this is the standard interior. So we've got a mix of artificial leather, vinyl, and cloth in the center. Now, having cloth centers is really important. You don't want to be sitting on vinyl. And in summer, this is still going to keep relatively cool, even though it's a darker interior. But we've basically got so many of the key Leon fundamentals here. A 2-litre turbo engine, 140 kilowatts of power, so more than you're getting in a standard Golf, more than you're getting in a standard A3, more than you're getting in a standard Octavia. So that's quite nice. We've got adaptive dampers on 15 stages. And as you can see, they haven't made the base Leon look like a rental car spec or something like that outside, have they? Likewise, the interior presents very nicely. Now, you're probably not going to confuse really any Cupra interior for being luxury grade, and the brand, to their credit, says they're not trying to be a luxury brand. It's probably a little elevated above the mainstream, and I think that's kind of how it presents. We've got this lovely leather wheel here with perforations. We've got plastic paddle shifters. And we have copper detailing here on the steering wheel, which is Cupra's brand color, but we also have physical controls on the wheel, whereas in Golfs and a few other Volkswagen Group products that are a little newer than the Leon, you have touch-sensitive buttons, so of course this is a little bit easier to use. Looking further afield, we have a 12-inch touchscreen here on the dash, which is relatively crisp. The resolution could be higher, but you get integrated navigation, wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and it all works reasonably well. Now, of course, you know, every review you watch of this car is going to crap on about the touch-sensitive climate controls. And yes, they are annoying. Yes, they are not illuminated at night, which is incredibly daft. But once you kind of get the hang of the system and you tap through the klima menu on the screen, you can kind of adjust everything relatively quickly. I did have a Cupra Formentor for 6 months, so I got used to it like an owner would, and trust me, you get a little less annoyed over time. Looking forward, we've got a 10-inch digital instrument cluster, which has a reasonable level of customization. It's not quite as good as the one in the Audi A3 for outright customizability, but it's pretty good and it looks attractive with a nice big tacho being one of the selectable screens. The rest of the materials are generally pretty nice. You know, you can find the scratchy stuff if you want to down here on the center console, but at this price, that's not too bad. The seats themselves, quite ergonomic. The manual ones in this car get pretty low. They just lack a little bit of under thigh angle adjust. It'd be great if they had a dial to adjust that. But the big solution, and the one I'm recommending, is that you just tick the leather package in this car. So you get leather seats instead. They're heated, they're electrically adjustable, at least on the driver's side. And you also get Beats premium audio, which is a slight step above the actually not too bad standard stereo that comes with the Leon. Most small cars that are as compact as this one have pretty itsy bitsy back seats, but as you can see, the packaging of the Leon is pretty good. Now, if you're going to put tall people into the back of a Leon, just make sure to go down to a Cupra store and see if they fit, but I certainly do at 6 foot. Headroom is good. This car doesn't have the optional sunroof. Legroom's fine, and tow room is also good. Now, there is a 5th seat here in the center. Probably wouldn't really want to use that one. So instead, I'd probably deploy the armrest, which has 2 cup holders and an espresso holder. It also has a pass through to the boot. Air vents here, actually a third climate zone, pretty cool, and 2 USB-C ports. The materials in the back do take a step backward, but I think you can't really ask for too much more than this in a car which is as compact and short in size as the Leon. Coming around the back of the Leon now, we see another one of this small car's attractive angles. I think it is a handsome vehicle. You can of course let me know what you think down below in the comments. This Leon also has a full width light bar, which makes it quite recognizable at night too. And like all Cupras, we only have the brand name at the back. If you want to find a Leon badge, you won't, but it is written in the tail light. So that's one for Cupra spotters out there. The other way that you're going to pick a base model V is not just the 18-inch wheels, it also has a slightly different rear diffuser treatment, and that changes as you walk up the range to the VZ, the VZE plug-in hybrid, and the VZX, which is the slightly manic top spec version of this car. Now in Europe, you can also get a Leon SW wagon, which Cupra Australia has certainly not ruled out bringing here, which would be a nice addition, particularly because it has all-wheel drive. The hatchback is front drive only, and that means that it does have a very, very deep boot because there's no all-wheel drive system to package. You're going to be able to get several suitcases in here, at least mid-sized ones. Maybe you could stack a couple of bigger suitcases. It's not quite as well finished as a Golf's boot. We don't have the dual height boot floor, for instance. The boot floor itself is maybe a little flimsier, but it does hide a space saver spare. Not as good as a full size, of course, but certainly better than nothing when so many cars are launching without a spare at all. And as you can see, that tailgate's pretty easy to close. So what is the Cupra Leon V like to drive? Well, the main thing about the driving dynamics of this car is that it's basically like the other Cupra Leons. And that's a good thing because this is one of the most dynamic hatchbacks to drive ever, I reckon. It basically feels like the lightest, most agile interpretation of the Volkswagen Group's MQB platform in a hatchback that isn't something really small and light like a Polo or a Fabia, because of course the Leon is more like a Golf in that it rides on the full version of MQB with a multi-link independent rear suspension. And that makes all the difference for cornering sophistication, for refinement, for ride comfort, and also for noise in the cabin, at least from the back end. That's all to one side, because what the Leon does best is it offers this incredibly delicate, sophisticated, high-end handling balance, which really belies the fact that on paper it's just kind of yet another Volkswagen Group hatchback with front-wheel drive. To describe it in such simple terms would really be to do any Leon a disservice, because what this car gets so right is the fine-tuning of the chassis is just delicious, really. You can tip it in on this light but precise and intuitive steering. You can play around with the chassis balance on the throttle or on the brake, and you can really place this car exactly where you want on a country road. Now, I'm on one of my favourite testing roads, southwest of Sydney in regional New South Wales, and the big surprise about the Leon has actually been its capability in pretty ordinary conditions. It's not so bad today, but it rained all day yesterday, and I think everybody was expecting the Leon V to fall apart a little bit, or at least not be as sophisticated when the going gets a bit tough. And in fact, the bandwidth of this car and that breadth of ability really continues to shine through at perhaps a slightly lower limit in wet weather, but it does still let you really exploit the balance of this chassis. Now, that's true of the Leon V, it's true of the VZ, it's true of the VZE and the VZX. And so really, the point I end up coming to, having done several hundred spirited kilometers now in the Leon V, is that I think for most people, the cheapest Leon is all you're going to need. Overseas, there are cheaper versions of this car. There is a 110 kilowatt 1.5 litre turbo engine, which Cupra Australia decided was not quite the right fit. That's an engine shared with the A3 and similar to what's in a standard Volkswagen Golf. Instead, the range is opening with this 2 litre, 140 kilowatts of power, 320 newton meters of torque, and a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. And to be honest, it is an incredibly effective combination. I think it just keeps its nose ahead of ever feeling like it doesn't have enough go. And when you really do have a crack in this car on your favorite road with a decent speed limit, with a 100 speed limit, you're not having to work this car really hard to drive it at the highest legal speed that you can go. but instead it just feels like it has an elegant sufficiency of power and muscle. It's not overpowered. Probably one of the things you could say to criticize in a way the Leon VZX in particular is that it is an absolute rocket ship. And you actually, you know, if you're full throttle in that car, you're hitting the speed limit and beyond very, very quickly. The Leon V actually lets you enjoy the car arguably a bit more because it is actually a little slower without feeling slow. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, of course, we're yet to run an independent acceleration test on the V, but I'm expecting that it will pull up a number maybe somewhere in the high 6s to low 7-second range. We'll see later if I'm right. But what we've found is Leons are generally pretty quick because they're light and because the combination of their turbocharged EA888 2-litre turbo engine and the DSG automatic is near its best in this car. There's really no transmission refinement problems here. It just gets on with the job. Demerits, well, I think you'd say the Leon doesn't ride as well as a Golf, but I don't think Cupra has gone out to set this car up to have as much of a comfort balance that Volkswagen does engineer into its Golf. So people that are seeking a really plush ride would probably prefer to go for the Volkswagen or pay a bit more for the Audi A3. Certainly though, the Cupra Leon rides much better than something like a Mazda 3 or a Kia Cerato GT. And that's important because the Leon V is kind of around the price of something like a Cerato GT or a top-end Mazda 3. So you kind of have to consider it as one of these options that sits between the mainstream and the premium segment. Another demerit is it's pretty loud in here. I'm not sure how much is going to come through on camera, but I'm doing 97 kilometers per hour on a semi-coarse chip Australian back road, and it's pretty rowdy. You can turn up the stereo, either of which of the available stereos are decent enough, but you're always having to kind of defeat this roar. It's obvious that there's less sound insulation in the Leon compared to the Golf or the A3 on the same platform. But really, apart from that, it's kind of about it. This car is a very, very enjoyable, sporty little hatchback to drive in any of its flavors. The plug-in hybrid's really impressive, even with a depleted battery. The VZX won a comparison that we conducted against the i30N some months ago. The VZ is sort of right on that Golf GTI power territory, but for me, the big surprise, probably the most pleasant of all, is that the V is so compelling and you don't feel like you're losing out just because you've gone for the cheapest. In fact, it might be the most charming of them all. So those are my impressions of the new Cupra Leon V. Probably the best choice out of the Leon range, I reckon, at least from my priorities. Because for me, this car is fast enough. If you go for the leather pack inside, it's luxurious enough and it rides better than any other Leon thanks to its 18-inch wheels and those 15-stage adaptive dampers that make this vehicle just so sophisticated. And for about 50 grand drive away, I reckon this thing is quite a deal. Now, prices are going to increase for the MY24 year, but there's actually still about 100 MY23 Leons in stock at the old price. So that's a bit of a cheat code. If you like the look of this car, you probably want to head out there and try and get your hands on one sooner rather than later. Now, very keen on your opinion, so let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell if you've liked this video, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.